Hello everybody, how are you? Do you have an RC car that you've never used? And I'm not talking about shelfers, I'm talking about an RC car that you intend to use and there's traffic going by, but you haven't used. For example, I have a shelfer. I have a TT02, Tamiya TT02 white special, which has no electronics in it at all, bought for being on a shelf, put it together. I've got no intention of ever running it. I don't count it as an RC car, it's just a display item. This, on the other hand, this is something different. This is a Team Losi JRX-S Type R, and I bought it, sort of, I half bought it, half got given it for my birthday by Rachel. She contributed to it. This was years and years and years ago, and my intention was to race it. My intention was to use this thing, and I have never, ever, ever, ever used it. And it's really frustrating, because it's a fantastic looking thing. Now, to give you a little bit of backstory, I used to race in competition with that red car up there. That's my Team Losi JRX-S, and I had great success with it and great fun with that car. When I gave up RC racing when the brushless scene came on, because at the time you needed brushless or you were obsolete, obviously, but the costs were astronomical, absolutely ridiculous, and RC touring car racing in Scotland died overnight. Like, it basically collapsed, and there was very few people doing it. Anyway, then I went to university and blah, 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 blah. Life went by and I never went racing again. But I always did want to go racing again, I really did. And then several years later, I don't know how I got into the subject. Maybe I was speaking with Matthew, my brother-in-law, and maybe I was talking about RC racing or something, but I just got... And oh, I'll tell you another thing, there was a guy in the MS UK forum who had a sort of racer diary going, and he was just updating us on how he got on, and it filled me with that same feeling. I was like, I want to do it again, I want to go racing again. The bug seemed to bite again. I was like, right, that's what I want to do. So I wanted to go racing again. The JRX-S was very, very long in the tooth by that point. I mean, that car I got in 2002, Christmas 2002. This would have been about, I don't even know, 2012 at this point or something. So I was like, right, I want another Losi touring car. Losi was my favourite RC manufacturer at the time. I'm not sure if I have a favourite anymore, but certainly at the time it was. And I was thinking, well, I want another Losi. I definitely do. I'm going to go racing again, that's what I want. The successor to that was the JRX-S, which wasn't as well received as the JRX-S. It wasn't as innovative. And that was one of the most innovative chassis ever. I mean, it was so different from everything else that came before it. And really since, it's not really had that much. Italian have copied the drivetrain with, I think it's the TA07 or something, or TB07. I'll put it up, I can't remember the name of it, but it has the same single belt drivetrain with the same way the belt loops around the tensioner, like that. Anyway, the JRX-S wasn't that well regarded, but the JRX-S Type R was an evolution of that, and that's what this is. And that was the last touring car that Team Losi ever made. And it was a few years out of date by that point. I think it came out in 2009 roughly. And this was, again, like I say, 2012 maybe, so it was at least 3 years old, maybe a little bit more, I don't know. But I figured, how much better can this stuff be? I did hear from other people who did still do racing that the latest and greatest wasn't so necessary anymore, because there was a big exponential increase in how good the chassis were, and that was a bit of a leap forward. But then it sort of plateaued off, and then you're talking about tiny incremental upgrades over the years, and really a 5-year-old car can hang with a brand new one, really, with a good driver. So I just figured, right, I'll get a JRX-S Type R. I like the look of it. It was still a Losi, and so I managed to get one from America. I got it shipped over. They had been used in a couple of practice sessions. It had never really been raced properly. It had been built for a race club, used a couple of times maybe. Perfect condition. It had never been used outdoors. It was only indoors on carpet, but immaculate. I think they only did one meeting maybe, or 2 meetings. Like, it was almost untouched. And that's what I managed to get it. And because I looked for so long, I looked all over the internet. I really desperately wanted one. There was none of them for sale. They were super rare. Managed to find this one. It came with this horrible shell. It came with this sort of, it wasn't like a race car shell. It was more like a show car, a sort of bling mobile with this sort of flippy paint. It wasn't like the flip paint that goes purple to green bit. It was like a sort of pearl reddy pink that changed its hue as you looked at it. It was utterly hideous. It was so, what's the word, chintzy and just hot. It's the sort of thing you'd see, don't know, you know, back in the, you know, 15 years ago or 20 years ago, whenever Fast and Furious was the rage, and you see Honda Civics driving around in flip paint and all the glitter paint and like horrible stuff. It was like that. So that was gone. I wanted a race car. So I did this, gunmetal grey. I can't remember. It's a Parma Type M, I think it's something like that. Maybe it's a Parma. I got a Parma from Matthew and I got shells. We had 2 different shells, and I got one for him, one for me. One of them was a Parma, and I can't remember if it was this one or that one. It does. Well, this one's got the Parma sticker, so this is the Parma. This is the Parma Type M. Built this. Okay, we're going to go racing. Problem was, at the time, I lived down in Dunbar, which is quite far south in Scotland. It's not too far north of the Scotland-England border. And the club I wanted to join, my old club didn't do touring cars anymore. That was in Dunfermline. The club I wanted to join was in Dundee. Dundee was about 2 hours north, maybe around about 2 hours north. So it was quite far to drive for an RC club, but I mean, I would do it maybe, but at the time I was working for this company. I was working offshore, but I was also working employed by a company down Dunbar, and they were utter crooks, just awful human beings. Apparently they still are. Everybody, like, they got, no one likes them. Their reputation offshore is abysmal, but they're such egomaniacs and narcissists that they think they're all the best and all the rage, but nobody likes them. They pay the worst wages in the industry, and I had no money. I had to borrow money from my parents just to cover my rent, and my rent was cheap. My rent was £350 a month for a 2-bedroom house. I mean, it was cheap because it was up in the middle of nowhere in the sticks. I still couldn't afford it, so I didn't have the spare petrol money or diesel because I had a pickup truck at the time, and I didn't really have the funds to do it. And so I was like, well, I want to do it at some point, but we'll just wait. We'll just wait. The car's here, I've got it, and it's in great condition, and we'll just wait. Unfortunately, by the time I moved into my old place in Fife and got myself, I'm still not great financially. I'm not going to lie about it. I mean, I'm not going to beat around the bush here. I'm not well off. I'm doing better than I did. But we're in a position, right, I can go racing now. Unfortunately, the Dundee club doesn't do touring cars anymore. So I was ready to do it. Matthew's got himself a TC5 because he was going to join me as well. Nobody does it. I'll keep looking because I think there's a couple of clubs left in Scotland now. I'm sure there's a couple who do touring cars, but really buggies or GT12s are all the rage. Nobody really does it. So the plan, as it stands now, I still want to race this, I still want to drive it, but I'm going to have to accept that it's not going to be raced in anything official. The plan, once all this lockdown COVID nonsense is finally behind us, if it's ever behind us, is to start up our little fun club again. We'll see if I can make it possible. I mean, I live in the Stirling area now. Scott lives in the Edinburgh area now. Matthew lives in Fife now. And a couple of friends who are involved and want to be involved again live in Perth now. And we need to try and find somewhere that's relatively central to everybody. I don't mind doing most of the travelling because I absolutely adore racing, and I'll do that. But we want to try and get the club started again, just the fun club. I want to get at least 6 or 7, maybe 8 members. I want to have a decent amount because there needs to be a reasonable amount of people per race. I don't want 1v1 in a race, in a heat. I want to have 4 cars, maybe 5 cars in each heat. So there needs to be enough people. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But we also need carpet. We need some carpet, rolls of carpet to be able to tape down and then pull up again. Because the point is, the plan is to use wood floor, slippy floor still, Losi JRX-S, Matthew's TC3, etc. And then also sometimes use carpet, put the carpet down, and I'll use this car on foam tyres. But we'll see, it might still be a pipe dream. So I've owned this car for probably, I don't know, 8 years as a guess, roughly, and I've never used it. So it is a bit rubbish, but I'll show you the car anyway. It is glorious. It's so nice. Not as innovative as that, like I said. That looks nothing like any car before or since. This one's a little bit more typical. But the material quality of this and the fit and finish of this car is so nice. Probably the nicest I've come across. It's running... Oh, in fact, I'll show you it first rather than describe it. Look at this car. Look at this car. fully carbon fibre, as you can see. I love this sort of gunmetal. I mean, it needs a bit of a dust, but the gunmetal metal, I like the colour scheme. And HPI, I've got purple. Losi, I've got this sort of steely grey. It's got the metal battery door, battery bar, battery mount, battery cover. It's nice, really nice. You'll notice, like a HPI Pro 3, HPI with the Pro 3 innovated the central battery and try and keep the weight down the middle. But the problem with the HPI Pro 3 is it didn't have a top deck. So the HPI Pro 3 was as flexible and floppy as a wet napkin. It just didn't work on any high grip or high traction tracks at all. It worked okay in a slippy floor, wooden floor, because you could generate a bit of grip from its flex and its leaning. But there's a reason the Hara, Atsushi Hara, is that how you pronounce them? The world champion used to drive for HPI. There's a reason the Hara edition had a full top deck and looked nothing like the standard car. Actually, this looks a lot like the Hara edition HPI Pro 3. What Losi did to get around that is the HPI, you load the battery in the top, put the cover on it, had no top deck. This Losi does have a top deck, you load the battery from the bottom. So you've got to take out these 4 screws. Now that I'm worried about because they're very small, so I need to make sure I've got a really nice fitting Allen key so I don't round these off. But and you don't give them much torque. That's the point. You're very gentle with them. But that gives you the very low center of gravity, central mass, and still give you the stiffness of a chassis that has a top deck. Just a wonderful looking piece of kit. All the adjustment in the world I'll ever need. Big teeth on the belt, big tooth engagement. It means the belts can run looser than some other cars. Big differentials. And the differentials are symmetrical front to back, so you can just buy one and repair either. I don't know if it has no, it doesn't have a floating servo mount. That was something that came later. Floating servo mounts were all the rage later on. I don't think it does. If it does, the servo's sitting damn close to the bottom of the chassis, but I don't think it does. In case you're wondering what that is, older touring cars and older RC cars in general, the servo was bolted flat onto the chassis, which meant if you're building a race chassis, you want to have the flex. It's very involved to the technical side of it, to try and get the flex in the right places and the right amount of flex in the right places and things. And it was to do with, like I said, everything had plateaued off, and you had incremental improvements. After you had the big boom, this car's much better than this, this new car's much better than the old one, and the next one's much better than that one, and it's all right. And then eventually everything plateaued off, and it's like, okay, the new car's slightly better in a couple of areas, just tiny little details. And one of the things they were working on is, and not just Losi, but everybody was trying to get the flex of the chassis spot on to generate grip for different surfaces. So you have cars like Matthew's TC5 that have different top decks. You can buy all sorts of different top decks to configure it for different track types. Anyway, the point is the flex, there was no flex where the servo mounted. The servo would mount flat, and that part of the chassis had zero flex. So if you had a chassis like that, which has everything down the one side and all the electronics down one side, the battery down the other, at the front of the chassis is where the servo is. So this side of the chassis is going to have no flex because the servo's there, and this side of the chassis is going to have some flex because there's nothing there. So to get around it, they made floating servos, which you got the servos are on the mounts itself. You've got a couple of bolts, and the servo's floating, and it's free floating. It's not rigid on the chassis. Now this one, I don't know. I mean, it's mounted on servo mounts, but it's so close to the chassis that I think it's touching. So I couldn't tell you that's floating or not. I'm not fussed. I don't care. This is not the latest and greatest anymore. This is a very old chassis now. It's well over 10 years old. It came with a Team Orion, a black Team Orion motor. I can't remember, what was it called? No, I can't remember. But it was funny because it was so smooth. The thing ran great. And in my old house was so damp. It was so damp. I had moisture catchers in the cupboard, in a few different places in the house, but specifically in the cupboard where I used to store my RC cars. And it would fill. I mean, it was like a cheese grater. The cheese grater where you grate the cheese in a tub below. And you take the top off and it's in the tub. It was a bit like that. It had a moisture catcher, and I'd fill up twice a week and have to empty it. And it was like half a litre of moisture every couple of days or 2-3 days. It's horrific. And all of my RC cars at the time all the screws started rusting and it was horrible. So this one I had to treat all the screws. I think I maybe got a new screw kit, I can't remember. Anyway, I think that caused some damage because when I you can see, like, I don't know if you can see, but the top of this speed controller, some of the metal's gone greened. It's gone green because of the damp. Anyway, when I got to my then new house, my old house now, which didn't have any moisture problems, this thing started acting weird. And when it was accelerating, the motor was reaching an RPM and dipping and going up again, and it was sounding a bit weird and sounding a bit rough. And I thought, I think the moisture's damaged the motor, because famously, censored brushless motors are not waterproof. I mean, most brushless motors are not waterproof. So I got this Speed Passion Triple M competition motor, which was a newer design than the Orion that was in it, and put it in, and it was the same thing, just as rough, just as weird. I was like, oh, I don't really want to buy a new ESC. It's a very nice ESC, Tecan RS, an old ESC now, but still a very good competition ESC. So I got the Tecan Link to plug it into the computer, and for some reason, just from sitting, I don't know if it was the moisture or whatever, but the profile had changed, because this used to run perfectly. I mean, obviously I've never driven it, but I've sort of ran it around the house, sort of held it in my hand. It was all smooth, and it would be very linear. I have a linear progressive power. So, and for some reason, all of a sudden it was going, and it was, the profile had changed. If you look at the graph, the power profile was like, here's the RPMs, so just reset it to default, and it was a straight line again, and then obviously it was all fine. So I didn't need a new motor, but it's okay. I gave that motor to Matthew, so now he has one for his TC5. Weird, I don't know why, but this Tecan RS has never showed any problems since. These is it Intellect batteries. They came with the car as well. They're still perfect. They're really, really nice batteries. 3,800 milliamp hours, 2-cell, hard case. Yeah, came with this transmitter here. This is all the video gear came with that. I've never raced with a trigger and steering wheel transmitter before. I've only ever raced with sticks. So at first I was like, oh, maybe I should change this to sticks. And I think I will if I struggle. But, you know, I'll see how I can adapt. We'll see. We will see. There you have it. My JRX-S Type R. Probably the nicest RC car I own. And it's the one I have not driven. It's crazy. I really, really desperately want to. The only other car I have that I have never driven is that Tamiya TL01. Now, I haven't owned that for very long, maybe owned it for a year or so. And I bought it because it's exactly the same car as my first ever hobby grade RC car. So I bought it for nostalgia reasons. Unfortunately, the guy who did it made an absolute pig of the body shell. So I bought it, and the body shell was done, but it wasn't built. So I built it. I might get a replacement body shell, see if I can find one, because it's not in great nick. But that one, again, I'll use at the club. I'd want to keep the chassis immaculate because it's a collectible Tamiya. I'm definitely not running this outside. Definitely not. Yeah, hopefully one day I can drive this and experience it to see what it's like. I hope it handles well. After all this time, it would be really disappointing if it was a dog. I can't see that being the case though. And hopefully one day you guys get to see it as well. It's so nice. I wonder if there's any charge in this light bulb. Let's see. I know you're supposed to, yes, you're supposed to use. You're supposed to do storage charging, I know. But I've never done that really. Super quick servo. No, obviously no reverse, it's a race car. Smooth. I should probably storage charge these, probably. Right, well, thank you for watching. Sorry this was a bit of a waffly video, but hey, it's my JRX-S Type R. I hope you like it. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye bye.